Finding a percentile from a cumulative relative frequency table can be quite easy if you know where to look. Reading the frequency table takes a little bit of focus, so let's make sure that we understand what each column represents in this table. The data came from 50 statistics students who were asked how much sleep they get per school night, rounded to the nearest hour. We can see that the responses were anywhere between 4 hours of sleep each night up to 10 hours of sleep each night. So in that first column of our table, that's where we can see the different responses that we got from the students. In the frequency column, so the second column of our table, we can see how many students responded with each of the different hour amounts. So we can see 2 students said they sleep 4 hours, 7 students said they sleep 6 hours, 14 students said they sleep 8 hours, and so on. Relative frequency is going to give us an idea of how large that group is in each row relative to the entire data set. So looking at the 0.14 here, that tells us 14% of the data is in that row. 14% of the students surveyed sleep 6 hours a night. If we were reading our frequency table incorrectly, we might think that this was the 28th percentile because we see 28%. But that 28% is telling us that the 14 students that sleep 8 hours each night make up 20% of the data set. But that's not the same thing as a percentile. A percentile tells us the cut in the list of data that separates a certain percentage of the bottom portion of the data. So the 28th percentile is some number in the data set that cuts our group into a bottom 28% from the top. That's where cumulative relative frequency comes in handy. Notice that as we go down the column, we're adding up all of the relative frequencies. So the 0.28 in the cumulative relative frequency column tells us that in the first 3 rows, we have 28% of the data. Not just in the row where 0.28 shows up, but in that row and including the 2 above it. So all of the students that responded they sleep 4, 5, or 6 hours each night, they make up the bottom 28% of the data. In other words, a 0.28 cumulative relative frequency tells us that the 2 students who sleep 4 hours a night, the 5 students who sleep 5 hours a night, and the 7 students who sleep 6 hours a night, they make up the bottom 28% of the data. An easy mistake to make would be to say that the very last data value in that list of the bottom 28% of the data is the 28th percentile, but that's incorrect. The 28th percentile is going to be the number that divides those data values from the rest. So we can't take one of those 6s and call it the percentile because we need it to be in that bottom 28% of the data. The 28th percentile is between the last 6 and the very next data value. So it lives right here between the 6 and the 7. If we were to continue listing our data out, we'd have 12 7s, 14 8s, yada yada yada. All we really care about is what this division is, the P28. So to the left of the 28th percentile, we have a 6. To the right of the 28th percentile, we start listing off 7s. So the 28th percentile is between the last 6 and the first 7 in our data set. To find the 28th percentile, we'll average those 2 numbers. So we'll add together the 6 and the 7, cut it in half. We find 6.5 is the 28th percentile. So P28, 28th percentile is 6.5.